She thought her life was built on certainty, on careful plans, gentle mornings, and the soft rhythm of a heartbeat inside her. One ordinary evening, a forgotten call and a single overheard sentence forced her to choose not only what she would keep, but who she would become. This is Maya's story, about truth, courage, and the quiet rising that follows a sudden change. Maya Hart had learned to measure comfort in quiet things. The neat crease of crisp napkins at a dinner she'd arranged, the soft way the sunlight pooled on her study floor each afternoon, and the small, insistent kicks that began to shift the center of her life. A new heartbeat that kept time with her own. 6 months into pregnancy, she moved through her house as if through a living photograph. Everything arranged, everything polished, a life curated and steady. Ethan's work had always been a frame around her days. He was a man who spoke in plans and projections, a founder of a firm whose name appeared in profiles and magazine columns. His presence arrived in bursts, evenings of laughter, then gone again for conferences and strategy sessions. Maya had accepted the rhythm. She was an artist of calm. She taught, she painted, she planned the nursery with a soft palette and a bookshelf of stories she'd read since childhood. For her, stability was not simply comfort. It was a promise she wanted to pass on to the small life growing inside her. On a cool evening, with rain knitting the garden into darker greens, Maya sat by the window and cradled her phone. Ethan had called earlier from a late meeting. They traded the usual small things. What she had eaten, a joke about a ridiculous email, the way the baby had kicked in patterns. "I'll be home late," he promised, the finality in his voice as familiar as the clock's tick. She set the phone down on the bedside table and returned to her sketchbook. Minutes passed in the soft blur of making. The house leaned around her like a shelter. Time unspooled. The phone hummed again, thin and insistent. Maya picked it up automatically. Ethan's name filled the screen. She smiled before lifting the receiver. His voice was warm, easy. "How's my favorite artist?" he teased. She answered. With the same small jokes, a soft rhythm they used to steady the distance. They spoke of mundane things and plans for the weekend, the hospital tour, a walk in the park, the ordinary bits that seemed in a way to describe the future. After a while she heard the faint click that signaled a call ending. The voice faded the way it always did, a comfort she stored like a small coin. She pressed the corner of the screen to confirm the call had ended and was about to set the phone down when something held her. The call timer, surprisingly, was still counting. She frowned and tapped the end call button. Then a voice came through the line that she did not expect. It was an easy, practiced voice, full of light laughter and casual confidence. It was not a harsh sound. It wasn't meant to wound. It simply illuminated a different room. "You were brilliant tonight," the voice said. The words were soft, almost conversational, yet when she listened, they struck a shape against everything she had assumed. Ethan's tone shifted subtly. He was laughing. A side of him she had not been invited into filled the sound. "It was a big night," he said, "but I'm thinking about home, about you, about the baby." Maya's chest tightened. The conversation that followed was not one between strangers. It was easy, private, and it outlined intimacies she had not imagined listening for. It did not need to be cruel to change her world. Maya did not make a scene. She did not collapse or throw objects. For a long minute she sat, breath even, as if a hush had fallen from the ceiling. The nursery down the hall seemed suddenly smaller and more luminous, the paint, the tiny mobile she had hung, things she had arranged herself with the earnestness of hope. Everything gentle remembered itself. A human mind tries to translate a sudden new image into the language of yesterday. Maya did the same. She glanced at photographs on the mantel where she and Ethan smiled at a wedding they'd attended, the captioned cards that promised future years. She remembered the way he pressed his hand to her back the night they first learned they were expecting. Those memories folded in around her like warm linens, yet the voice on the line had created a crease that did not press flat. Instead of acting, Maya allowed herself to be quiet. She listened to the remaining words, not for accusation or spectacle, but for truth. The voice talked about small things, shared plans, work that would move layers of money and influence, an inside joke about a place they had once vacationed. She heard Ethan laugh in a tone she recognized, but not as the man who had tucked her in, not as the man who had promised certain mornings. It was companionship that existed alongside her, never intended to be understood by her. When the call finally ended properly, an ending that snapped a line in her chest, the room seemed to breathe again. The house resumed its ordinary noises, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft scratch of rainfall. Maya rose and walked to the nursery. She ran her hand along the crib rail, as if testing the reality of the wood. The baby moved, and the movement was a small, clear proof of a future that did not belong to any single story. She did not call Ethan. She did not interrupt his meeting. Instead, she put on a sweater and stepped outside into the rain. The air felt honest and cool. Under the streetlight, the droplets made small silver seams. She walked, taking no particular street, only a path that let her think. She let her mind unspool questions, and then set them down, one by one. What did she want? What did the life she had built mean, if some part of it had been arranged without her knowledge? What legacy did she want to pass to her child? Answering. Truth requires two kinds of bravery, the bravery to look and the bravery to act. Maya felt both, though she did not yet know how she would act. Back at home, she opened a notebook and wrote 3 things: the name she wanted for the child, the 3 values she would teach: kindness, curiosity, courage, and one practical step she could take that week to claim her life back, no matter what it looked like later. She called her oldest friend, Lena, and spoke in plain terms. Lena's voice was immediate, a buoy. Whatever you decide from power, not fear, she said. We'll make a plan together. That small solidarity was like bread. It nourished a decision to move forward with care. No spectacle, no frantic confrontation. Maya would not let shame or blame define the day. Instead, she promised herself 2 things. She would keep the child safe and loved, and she would reclaim authorship of her own story. In the days that followed, Maya let herself feel disappointment and grief the way one might let a storm pass, with an umbrella of routine and the knowledge that weather changes. She continued to design her life in small acts, assembling tiny clothes, painting gentle stars on the nursery ceiling, gifting herself the habit of morning walks. She started volunteering one afternoon a week at a neighborhood center, where children came for after-school help, a simple action that felt like planting roots in different soil. At first, the change felt like a split, 2 currents pulling at the same rope. But slowly, then with no less force, the currents braided. Maya found resources she had not realized were there. Neighboring parents offered baby gear. Lena helped compile a list of practical steps. A therapist she met at the center helped her sort emotions into coherent choices. She learned that power sometimes arrives as small things: a bank account change, a medical appointment scheduled alone, a conversation in which she used the word "I" and meant it. A quiet truth emerged that surprised her. The heart inside her was not only a symbol of vulnerability, it was also a bold new taskmaster of joy. She began to sing little made-up songs to the baby as she sketched plans for a studio in their home. She imagined a life filled not with pretense, but with real presence: community dinners, nights of storytelling, a child who learned that adults could be messy and brave. The life she would give her child could be built on love that was earned and chosen, not on a set of images hung for display. Maya did not become a different person overnight. She moved in the slow, steady way that maps a sustainable path. Legal advice sought carefully, conversations prepared, friendships deepened. She discovered the unmistakable clarity of a woman who had decided to be deliberate. The forgotten call that evening had opened a space where truth could be sorted and where a new center of gravity could grow. It was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of the part where she learned her real capacity, to make choices rooted in integrity and to raise a child under the lights of honest love. By the time the nursery mobile swayed gently under a noon sun, and the baby's kicks had become a conversation, Maya had written a new promise in her notebook. Teach her that dignity is chosen. Teach her that courage can be gentle. She folded the paper, placed it in a drawer, and then went back to painting, letting the rhythm of brush on canvas reassure her that she would keep going, one careful, courageous step at a time. The morning after the call, Maya stood at her kitchen window watching the rain drip from the branches like silver threads. Her mind carried the weight of what she had overheard, yet in that silence, another thought bloomed. Perhaps endings are not the collapse of life, but the doorway into another. She pressed her hand to her growing belly and whispered, "We will be fine." That simple phrase became her anchor. Instead of drowning in questions, she decided to seek clarity. She began writing down small steps on a scrap of paper. Make an appointment, call Lena, organize documents. Each action felt like a candle lit in the dark. When Lena arrived later that afternoon, the two friends sat together drinking tea, and Maya finally allowed the truth to spill out. Rather than breaking, her voice steadied as she spoke, and Lena's response was firm. "This is not the end of your story. This is where you rise." Those words became a hook in her heart, pulling her forward. She realized that courage does not roar. Sometimes it sounds like the soft rustle of paper, the quiet act of making a list, the decision to believe she was more than what had been hidden from her. That night, she lay awake not with despair, but with the first spark of strength. Imagining a future she would design with her own hands, one filled with honesty, purpose, and a love her child could trust. Starting over felt like standing at the edge of a wide, unmarked road, and Maya realized that each step she chose could reshape not just her life, but her child's future. The hook was simple yet powerful. Reinvention is not born from comfort, but from courage. She rented a small room near the town center, its cracked walls and dusty windows whispering of possibilities, and declared it her studio. Here she unpacked brushes, fabrics, and old sketches, determined to weave survival into beauty. Every stroke of paint was more than color. It was proof she could build something new. At night, exhaustion pressed on her shoulders, but she held her daughter close and found strength in the gentle rhythm of a heartbeat that trusted her. Friends came by to help, neighbors offered encouragement, and soon the studio became more than a workspace. It became a symbol of resilience. Each order, each lesson she gave, stitched her confidence back together. The life she was crafting was no longer about appearances. It was about authenticity, hope, and the quiet triumph of creating a future with her own hands. The question of forgiveness arrived like a shadow at Maya's doorstep. And the hook was clear. Could she heal without letting bitterness write her future? She discovered forgiveness was not about excusing what happened, but about freeing herself from carrying his choices like heavy stones in her pockets. When Ethan finally asked to meet, she walked into the cafe with calm steps, her heart steady with a strength she hadn't known months before. Their conversation was measured, focused not on blame but on boundaries, on what was needed for their child's well-being. She did not raise her voice. She did not bend her truth. Instead, she spoke with quiet certainty, showing that power can be gentle and still unshakable. Afterward, she walked away lighter, not because the past was erased, but because it no longer held her captive. At home, she planted a small tree in the garden, its roots pressing into the soil like her own new beginnings. Each leaf became a reminder. Letting go does not mean forgetting. It means choosing to grow stronger, to live with peace, and to shape a future defined by dignity. Maya soon discovered a powerful truth that became the hook of this chapter in her life. Healing deepens when it is shared. What began as a small studio for her designs slowly transformed into a gathering place where stories, skills, and hopes intertwined. Parents came seeking advice, teenagers wandered in curious about art, and neighbors offered to volunteer their time. Maya taught with patience, showing young people how to turn discarded wood into shelves, how to mix colors into patterns that reflected their own voices. The studio became more than walls and paint. It became a heartbeat for the community. Each success story she witnessed reminded her that her pain had not been wasted. It had been reshaped into purpose. Local newspapers wrote about her. Donations arrived, and soon she launched weekend workshops that gave single parents both income and confidence. Every smile she saw in that space told her she was no longer just surviving. She was inspiring others to rise with her. Maya realized that her legacy would not be measured in wealth, but in lives touched by courage and kindness. The hook of Maya's final chapter was simple yet profound. True triumph is not loud. It is the quiet strength of a life rebuilt with love and honesty. Years later, her garden bloomed with colors she had planted, and laughter of children echoed through the yard. Her daughter, now a curious little soul, ran between the flowers, asking endless questions and painting her own dreams across the sky. Maya sat beneath the tree she had once planted in sorrow, reading the letters she had written during those uncertain nights, and smiled at how far she had come. The studio had grown into a thriving center where creativity and courage were taught side by side, and the community around her had become a family of resilience. Ethan remained a distant figure, bound only by shared responsibility, but his shadow no longer touched her light. Maya's story had turned into proof that even broken beginnings can lead to beautiful endings. The lesson she carried, and passed on, was that dignity, kindness, and faith in oneself can transform pain into a legacy of hope.